Hey everyone, today's Friday, May 1st. Today's lesson we're going to learn how to solve for the area and perimeter of complex shapes. So you can already see the difference. Instead of working with just squares and rectangles, we're going to work with some irregular shapes. And we're going to figure out how we can take an irregular shape, turn it into a whole bunch of squares and rectangles to help us to solve for both the area and the perimeter. So today's video is going to be a little bit longer because this is a new skill and it's actually pretty difficult. So I'm actually going to do problem number 1 and problem number 2 on your lesson for today, just to help you out, and so you have a better understanding of what we're going to be doing. Today you're also going to see that all of our shapes have little squares inside of them to help you figure out the area. And then after today's lesson for tomorrow, for Monday actually, we're going to get rid of the squares and make it a little bit more challenging. So the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to take our regular shape. And you can see today's shape looks like a block letter T. And the first thing we always need to do is we need to come up with the dimensions. So I'm going to start at the top, and each of these squares is 1 unit long. So I'm going to count my way across the top. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I know the length of the top is 7. I'm going to go down the left-hand side. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to go over the bottom of that part of the T. 1, 2. I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3. I'm going to count my way across 1, 2, 3. I'm going to count my way up 1, 2, 3. I'm going to count my way over 1, 2. And I'm going to count my way back up 1, 2, 3. And you can see now that we have all of the dimensions or all of the measurements for the entire shape. Before when we were solving for our rectangles and squares, I had always given you the top or the bottom if it was a rectangle, or the top or the side, or if it was a square, I gave you one of the units of measurement, and you were able to figure out the rest. For today's activity, you actually have to figure out all of the dimensions first. Now, the first thing I'm going to figure out now is I can actually figure out the perimeter. I have enough information to figure that out. And if you remember, for area, we're taking the length times the width of a square or a rectangle to figure out the area. And for the perimeter, we're just trying to add up all of the sides. So now, because I have all of the sides labeled, I can actually figure out the perimeter. So I'm going to do my doubles first. I'm going to start down here. I'm going to do 3 plus 3 is 6. And I'm just going to keep a running tally. So there's my perimeter. I have 2 and 2, which is 4. I have the side 3, which is 6. And then I know the top is 7 and the bottom of 3 is also 10. So I'm just going to add them together a while to get 10. And I'll cross those off because I use them. And now, perimeter is just adding up all of the sides. Well, I already have a 6 and a 4. If I add 6 plus 4, I get 10. I already have another 10 down here. So 10 plus 10, I'm going to draw a little caret here so you can see it, is 20. So the 6 is done, the 4 is done, the 10 is done. So now I have to add the 6. So 20 plus 6 is 26. So my perimeter for this complex or regular shape is 26 units. Now we have to figure out the area, which is obviously the harder part of this problem. And what they already did for you in the first example is they took the letter T and they put it into squares and rectangles for you already. So they divided up to make it a little bit easier. And now all you really need to do to figure out the area of the inside of this regular shape is to count all of the squares. So this section of the square right here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 units. And if you remember our formula, length times width, I could also multiply the 3 times the 2, and that would get me 6. I'm going to jump over to this side and do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I know this is 6. And also my formula, 3 times 2 is 6. Well, you're going to say, well, Mr. W, how do I do this box here? Would I multiply the 7 times the 3 and get 21? And I would say, well, no, you wouldn't, because this square here is only talking about, use a different color so you can see it, the part that I've highlighted in blue. It's this tiny section right here. So the first thing I could do really is I could just count all the squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Or I know this sliver on top right here is 3 units long. I know this unit here in blue is 3 units down. And I can multiply those together and get 3 times 3, which equals 9. So that's how I get 9 for that little section right there. And then the last part that I have to do is the square or the rectangle down here at the bottom. Again, I could count up all the squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Or I know this length is 3. I know this is 3. I could multiply those together and get 3 times 3. Now, since I have 4 different areas, I have an area of this part of the T, this part of the T, this part, and this, I can actually add all of those numbers up. So I can see there's 2 6s and there's 2 9s. So my area would actually be 6 plus 6, which is 12, 9 plus 9, which is 18, and then I add them together to get 30. So my area would be 30 units squared. If you think back to yesterday's example and the day before when we did the whole thing length times width to get the area, I could take my blue marker here, and this is what we're actually going to work on tomorrow. This whole section across the top is 7. This whole side down is 3, and that'll give me the area of the whole rectangle on top. 7 times 3 is 21. So that's the first part of the T. So it'll be 21. Down here on the bottom, the lower part of the T would be the length 3 times the bottom 3, and 3 times 3 is 9. And when you add those together, you're still going to get 30 units. So there's really 2 ways you can do a type of problem like this. If there are squares, you can actually count the squares to figure out the area, or you have to create rectangles or squares inside of it. In a little bit, we'll come back and I'll show you problem number 2, and we'll actually have to create the rectangles and squares.